Greetings, traveler. I'm SnapJelly, and I have been asked to talk about female warriors in history. So, here you go. Now, a lot of people seem to think that there were no female warriors whatsoever. Now, that is not true. But people also tend to exaggerate everything. They're not really happy with what they're getting. First things first. Alright, so in the first recorded preserved historical manual, the 133, which is a sword and buckler manual, it's about a priest and his students. Actually, one of the priest's students is depicted to be a woman. Now, also in the talhoffer, for example, there's also a specific case where you have one fighter with a rock inside of a socket, kind of looks like, fighting against somebody with a club inside of a hole. It's a really specific scenario, but again, the one carrying the sock is clearly depicted to be a woman. She's even depicted to hold up her breasts in one picture. You could also argue that men should do that as well, like if you're using one weapon, that you should keep your hand closed, but to me it seems pretty clear that she's doing this, which makes sense because there are no sports bras and those things would be flopping around all over the place and that would hurt probably. Another thing that I want to say is more like a theory of mine, but it's about a guard position that is named after women. It's the woman's guard. It has various different depictions, but it goes something like this, like, some people say that you should do it this way, pointing forward. Other people say you can do it more relaxed, pointing off to the side like this, or backwards like that. But it doesn't matter. This guard is designed to generate a lot of force. A lot of people say this makes sense because women are physically weaker, and well, the differences in strength between men and women is growing ever closer together, but it's now actually closer than it's ever been before. So the differences in the Middle Ages would have been even bigger. Now, I doubt that naming this guard the woman's guard was just a physiology joke. Saying, women are weaker, so we'll name this power-generating guard after females. Now, what I think, since cutting tests were also proven to happen in the Middle Ages, what I think is that people simply noticed that women had to put a lot more oomph behind their swing in order to get the same result as men. So instead of naming the guard position after women because they're weaker, I think the guard is actually designed to benefit the needs of the female fighter. But that's just a theory of mine. I'm not sure about that. There's also the Japanese Bugaisha, I think they're called, which is not HEMA because it's not Europe, but still, they are female fighters. They are warriors who were trained the same way as the samurai were trained to protect their household. Simple as that. So there were definitely female fighters in history. Females definitely played a part in HEMA, and it's foolish for anybody to say otherwise. But there's a big but. You see, a lot of people tend to go overboard. There were female warriors in history because it's foolish to say there were absolutely none. There must have been at least one who picked up a sword and knew how to use it, right? So it's foolish to say that there were none, but people are never happy. There were definitely less female warriors than there were male warriors. You see, people tend to look at individual people like Joan of Arc, for example, and say, oh, well, she's a woman, and see, so there are female warriors, but using one example, that isn't really a good argument. Then people tend to look at Amazons, saying things like, oh, entire societies based off of just women, and well, Amazons are about as real as mermaids are, so that's not an argument either. And I've even had arguments with people saying that there were just as many females on medieval battlefields as there were males. That is just not true. That will pose all kinds of problems, regardless of them being capable fighters or not, because we now know that women are just as capable to learn sword fighting as men are. But that's not the only thing you have to think about. See, women are, in a way, more important than men are, so you wouldn't send them out to battle. You see, men are expendable, more expendable than women at least. You see, let me just paint you a scenario. A country goes to war, and all the men in a specific village have to go to war, and after the war only 3 men come back. Right? This is very unlikely, but sorry, let's just say that only 3 come back. Then in 12 years, those 3 men could repopulate the entire village, because judging on medieval German law, you were an adult after the age of 12. So there would have definitely been quite a few boys in between all of those children, right? Now, if you would reverse the scenario, let's say that all of the women go to war, the men stay, and after the war only 3 women come back, then how many girls do you think those women would get after 12 years? At the very most. It's way less. Get my point? You need more women in order to keep your growth of population high. So it was actually beneficial for women, at least the majority of women, to stay home. This is also the reason why in some cultures one man could marry multiple women. Because most of the time there were simply not enough men. It's simple like that. And if you were a woman, you had no opportunity to grow, like economy-wise. All you could do really is marry a good husband. So that's what you want to do. You'd rather marry a husband that was already married than marry nobody simply because there were no men. So if you would bring women along, even if it's equal or not equal, doesn't matter. There will most certainly be some problems along the lines of rape. I mean, just putting it out straight, just think about, I made the connection to mermaids before. How desperate must you be to actually start sexualizing fish? Just think about that, right? People were away from home for months, years, right? So loneliness happened, and people actually, no, the opposite happened. People were never alone, and that poses a problem. There's definitely going to be some sexual tension building up, and somebody's about to snap at some point. So that's something you'd want to prevent, and if keeping the woman at home prevents that, well, there you go. Second point is the Amazons. Well, a lot of people like to point towards the Amazons. Amazon society makes no sense. Just everything people say about Amazons is just bullshit. I've heard people say stuff like Amazons used to cut off a breast because that helps them shoot a bow. What? Do you know how many female archers there are today with 2 breasts? Like, having boobs does not limit your capability to shoot a bow whatsoever. But if you've never seen a woman actually shoot a bow before, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? You shoot a bow and, oh, look at that, breast's in the way. Makes sense, right? If it's made up by somebody who's never actually seen it happen before. Like the Greek warriors. If people are alone on a boat, they'll start sexualizing fish. Now, if a bunch of warriors are alone with just warriors, then they'll start sexualizing warriors. Incoming the idea of the Amazons. It's ancient porn. It's not real. Just think about breeding for a second. Like, most people say that the Amazons used to capture their enemies and breed with them, but then you would still have the same low population problem that I mentioned before. Like, what would you do if you would get a son? You would be vulnerable for 9 months, large chance of death happening during the pregnancy, and then you would get a son. What do you do? Just kill it and try again? Come on, that doesn't work. And if you would only breed with your captives, that means you're spreading bad genes, right? You would want a man, the best man possible. You want the strongest of them all, right? He's most likely not going to let himself get captured. Just saying it. Amazon society makes no sense. It's not real. There's no proof of it. There's no proof of it either. It just doesn't exist. All right. And looking at individual people, I am also biased against that. I'm picking Joan of Arc as an example. Just excuse me for horribly mispronouncing that name. But it could be anyone really, man or woman in history. It doesn't matter. Any person that people speak of, you're most likely not hearing the truth. I mean, history is written the way that people want you to read it. You know, and Joan of Arc was, even if you don't know anything about her, right? Most people know that, she inspired the troops. She was a woman. Yeah, that's about it. That's as far as the knowledge goes. Now, that would probably also be as far as the knowledge of the average soldier did go. What? You see, if she was real, she was an icon. She helped inspire the troops. So if she would be sent into battle, she would be a huge target. Because if she boosts the morale of the men, and she dies, then the morale of the men would just plummet to the ground. So you won't want her to die, so you would keep her out of the fight. Right? She would just pretend as if she's fighting, and that's just if she is real, because she might not have even existed. People could just talk about her as if she exists, while her not even existing. People could just spread the word of Joan of Arc, oh, a brave woman fighting alongside men, and while nobody's ever seen her before, yet people will still say they have. That's just how people work. Like mermaids. They don't exist either. It's probably something like a manatee that people saw and be like, oh, a woman. People spread that word too, like, oh, mermaids exist. They don't. So why do we have to believe that Joan of Arc existed? We don't know. She may have, but there's just as big of a chance that she didn't. And even if she existed, how do we know that she did all the things that people say that she did? We don't know. We just have to agree. We just kind of have to assume that this is the truth. That's stupid, right? So that leaves you with three options. One is she was real, but she probably didn't do any fighting. Two is she was not real, she's just an idea or an ideal to help boost the morale of the men, and it worked. Or three, she was real, but everything that she did has just been highly exaggerated over time, which is, by all means, a great possibility. So, there you go. My thoughts about female fighters in history. There were definitely female fighters in history. That can be denied, if you ask me. But not as many. I mean, for example, in like Viking raids, like a lot of the Vikings were settlers, and they would of course bring their wives along, and they would get involved in battles at some point. So of course there would have been female warriors, but actually going for mercenaries and picking out women, that poses problems more often than not. Not because they're not capable fighters, but just because they can do things that men can't. Specifically making babies, and also they get periods and stuff, and actually get pregnant, which are all kind of things that you don't want in your army. I didn't even mention those things. But yeah, there you go. My opinion on female warriors in battle. There were female fighters. They were just as capable as men, as far as we know, but not that many. So, thank you for joining my quest, and I hope you'll join me in the next one. Bye, guys. Bye.